The Clockmaker's Tale. Samuel Green was not an ordinary craftsman. He was a clockmaker, one of the few left in the bustling town of Crestwood who still practiced the ancient art. His shop, tucked away on a quiet cobblestone street, was a haven of ticking, chiming, and the faint scent of wood polish. Time seemed to move differently inside, as if the clocks themselves dictated the rhythm of life within those walls. The shop had been in Samuel's family for 3 generations. His grandfather had opened it in the late 1800s, crafting clocks that adorned the homes of aristocrats and common folk alike. Samuel had inherited not just the shop but also a deep love for the intricate mechanisms that brought his creations to life. Each clock told a story. The mahogany grandfather clock in the corner had been commissioned by a young couple for their wedding. The small, ornate mantel clock on the shelf was a gift for a retiring schoolteacher. Samuel poured his heart into every piece, knowing that his work would mark the passage of time for others. One autumn morning, as Samuel was winding the clocks and preparing for the day, the bell above the shop door jingled. He looked up to see a woman hesitating at the threshold. She was in her late 30s, with dark hair tied neatly in a bun and a nervous expression. "Good morning," Samuel greeted, his voice warm. "How can I help you?" The woman stepped inside, clutching a small wrapped package. "I'm looking for someone who can repair an old clock," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You've come to the right place," Samuel replied, gesturing to the counter. "May I see it?" She placed the package carefully on the counter and unwrapped it to reveal a delicate carriage clock, its brass casing tarnished and its face cracked. Despite its condition, the craftsmanship was exquisite. Samuel's practiced, I recognized the style immediately. "This is a William Haywood clock," he said, impressed. "Mid-19th century, if I'm not mistaken. Where did you find it?" The woman hesitated before answering. "It belonged to my grandmother. She passed away recently, and I found it in her attic. It doesn't work anymore, but I'd like to restore it. It's one of the few things I have left of hers." Samuel nodded. "I can restore it, but it will take some time. Clocks like these require patience and precision." "That's fine," she said. "I'm in no rush. My name is Margaret, by the way. Margaret Ellis." "Pleasure to meet you, Margaret," Samuel said. "I'll take good care of it." As the days turned into weeks, Samuel worked on the clock with meticulous care. He disassembled its intricate mechanisms, cleaning each gear and spring. The process was slow but rewarding. As he worked, he found himself wondering about Margaret and her grandmother. What stories did this clock witness? What moments had it marked? One afternoon, Margaret returned to the shop to check on the progress. Samuel showed her the partially restored clock, its brass casing polished to a warm glow. Margaret's eyes lit up with gratitude. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers lightly over the smooth surface. "Thank you for taking such care with it." "It's my pleasure," Samuel replied. "Do you know much about its history?" Margaret shook her head. Not really. My grandmother never spoke much about her past, but she kept this clock on her bedside table for as long as I can remember. It must have meant something to her. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes objects like these carry stories we'll never fully understand, but they're still worth preserving. As Samuel continued the restoration, he discovered a small engraving on the underside of the clock's base. It read, "To my dearest Mary, with all my love, 1897. Intrigued, Samuel decided to share his discovery with Margaret. When she came to the shop the following week, he showed her the inscription. Margaret stared at the words, her expression a mixture of surprise and emotion. "Mary was my grandmother's name," she said softly. "I had no idea this was here. It must have been a gift from someone very special to her," Samuel said. "Perhaps your grandfather?" Margaret shook her head. "I don't think so. My grandfather's name was Edward, but he passed away before I was born. I've never heard of anyone else." The mystery deepened. Who was the giver of the clock? And what connection did they have to Margaret's grandmother? Samuel and Margaret decided to search through old family records and photographs in the hope of uncovering the truth. Their investigation led them to the local archives, where they pored over census records, newspaper clippings, and personal letters. They discovered that Mary Ellis had lived a vibrant life, filled with travels and friendships. One photograph showed her as a young woman standing beside a man in a military uniform. The back of the photo bore the name William. Could he be the one who gave her the clock? Margaret wondered aloud. Samuel examined the photograph closely. It's possible. If he was a soldier, perhaps the clock was a parting gift before he left for duty. Their search eventually uncovered a faded letter tucked inside an old family Bible. The letter, dated January 1898, was from William Haywood himself. In it, he wrote about his admiration for Mary and how he had crafted the clock as a symbol of his love. Margaret read the letter aloud, her voice trembling with emotion. He loved her, but it seems they were never able to be together. Do you think she kept the clock as a way to remember him? Samuel asked. Margaret nodded. I think so. It must have meant a great deal to her. It's strange to think that I never knew this part of her life. The clock was finally restored to its former glory. When Margaret came to collect it, Samuel placed it gently in her hands. It's more than just a clock, he said. It's a piece of your grandmother's story. Margaret smiled through her tears. Thank you, Samuel. You've given me a connection to her that I never thought I'd have. As she left the shop, Samuel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His work wasn't just about fixing clocks. It was about preserving memories and the stories they carried. The clockmaker's craft, he realized, was as much about time as it was about the moments that made life meaningful. And as the ticking of the clocks filled the shop once more, Samuel knew he had found his purpose.
Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, and share our channel Magic Mingle with your friends to enjoy more magical stories.